Hello friends, welcome to my channel Creating Essence. I am Megan. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Today I'm sharing with you all a much requested recipe of ours, and that is my gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free, nut-free, soy-free, basically gluten-free, vegan, and really allergy safe, but really fantastic gluten-free bread recipe. I shared last time my gluten-free baking flour recipe. I will put a link to that video as well as the recipe down below in case you haven't seen it. Just like with that recipe, this is a culmination of a whole bunch of different recipes from all over the internet, trial and error, and what worked well for us. And this is by far the best multi-purpose gluten-free bread recipe that I have found. It is great for toast, sandwiches. It really has a great crumb to it that is a lot like regular sandwich bread. It doesn't have an overwhelming flavor from crazy grains like buckwheat or things like that. It doesn't have the different common binder ingredients that you'll find, like psyllium husk, that can have really overwhelming off-putting flavors. It has a good texture and a very benign flavor. It also slices up and keeps in the freezer for quite a while. So I only have to make this recipe every so often because I can make 2 loaves at once and it keeps really well. So that's what I'm making today. My recipe in the printable down below is for 1 loaf, and I am going to be doubling it in my example today. But here's how I do it. The very first step that I need to do is whipping a 1/2 cup of aquafaba, which is just the liquid left over from cooking chickpeas, or that you can drain from a can of store-bought chickpeas. And 1 teaspoon cream of tartar. Then I put this on high and whip it for about 3 minutes. What we want from the aquafaba is called stiff peaks, which means we can scoop it up from here, and this is stiff. It's not floppy, it doesn't bend. So that's definitely stiff peaks. And carefully scrape this whipped aquafaba into a bowl to leave it off to the side, because I need my mixer. Now I'm putting 6 cups of my baking flour mix. And now 2.5 tablespoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of salt. And I'm just gonna use the whisk by hand and mix that up. My yeast mixture is nice and proof now, so we're gonna pour this in. I like to use the whisk for this mix, but you can use a paddle attachment. It's mostly combined. A little bit of dry spots left, but now we're gonna start incorporating more wet ingredients. A 1/2 cup avocado oil and 4 teaspoons apple cider vinegar. We mix this in. And this will take care of any dry pockets that were still in there. And now that it's mixed thoroughly, I'm gonna put it on medium-high for about 2 minutes until it's really smooth looking. Looks right. Now we're going to scrape in that whipped aquafaba we've had off to the side. And you really don't want this to deflate, so we're just folding it in. It's not gonna look really thoroughly combined because we don't want to like whip it or be very rough, but this is totally fine. While the dough is mixing, I used coconut oil to grease 2 bread pans. You really can use whatever kind of oil or butter that you prefer. And I'm just going to split this in half between the 2 pans. As you can see, it's like a thick cake batter or pancake batter sort of texture. That is the texture that you want. And I just like to use a spatula to smooth out the top because it is going to rise, but it's not going to make a puffy, smooth top, if that makes sense. So even though it's going to fluff up, what it looks like on the top when it goes in is kind of what it's going to look like when it comes out. Now I'm going to cover this and let it rise for 30 minutes while the oven preheats. But I found because it's so tacky, I actually like to kind of prop up my cloth. So I'm going to use my baking powder canister here and my salt canister on the other side and kind of make a tent over it. So it has a little proofing tent, but it's not going to touch the tops of the loaves. The oven's going to preheat to 375 and I'll be back in 30 minutes. All right, it's been a half hour. You can see they got a little bit puffier, no smoother, like I said, which is why I like to smooth it out with a spatula. But now they're going in the oven. For 1 hour. Looking perfect. Very nice. As you can see, it did rise up a bit. It looks really nice and golden brown. Another thing I like to do when it first comes out is to cover it with a cloth. I find that trapping some of that moisture really helps it come away from the pan completely clean. All right, after about 10 minutes, I like to move this onto the cooling rack, and I have found a trick. Gluten-free bread really likes to settle to the bottom. It can get really dense. So what I do is just tip them from side to side throughout the cooling process, and I wait until they're entirely cool to take them out of these pans. So in about 20 minutes to a half an hour, I'll turn them both that way. And this keeps all the moisture from sinking right down to the bottom. All right, it's pretty much all cooled. Just give it a little effort, and there it is. It's a really nice outer crust, and I'll slice it open and show you the inside. Look at that. It really is such a nice inner texture. Very bread-like. I mean, it is bread, but if you eat gluten-free, you know what I mean. It slices really nicely, and the texture is fantastic. I will keep one of these out and keep it in an airtight container on the counter, and it will keep for about a week. It keeps a little longer if you store that airtight container in the fridge. The other loaf I will just slice up so it's ready to use, put it in a Ziploc bag or some other kind of airtight container, and freeze it, and we can take it out one slice at a time to use as needed. The freezing really does not impact the texture at all. I would love to know if you try this recipe. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. As always, that printable recipe is linked down in the info box below, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it if you think anyone will find it useful, and subscribe to hang out for more. We'll see you again soon.